Imagine that you just had your first child and after coming back from the maternity ward, you slept all afternoon. He starts his first cry inside the crib. You quickly pick him up, try everything, bathe him, change his diaper, play with him, but nothing helps. He's really hungry, and even when you insist on breastfeeding him, the child is not satisfied. After a while, you discover the reason for the continuous crying. You don't have enough milk to breastfeed your child. Even though you feel sad, you don't waste any time. And then you buy an infant formula that can replace your breast milk, even though it's artificial milk. You know that it's going to save your little one's life. And that's why you're really glad that there's a company that invented such an amazing product. But on the other side of the coin, there's the manufacturer who invented the formula. Dissatisfied, looking at their sales report and realizing they're not making as much money as they wanted. For him to make a fortune, it would be necessary for all mothers in the world to be unable to breastfeed their children. In other words, for him there's a big obstacle. His main competitor is healthy breasts. However, the obstacle can be quickly overcome with a brilliant idea. And that was the idea that created one of the biggest food safety scandals of the 20th century. Nestlé, the largest company in the food industry in the world, was born in Switzerland in 1866 with the production of milk-made condensed milk, which would later be known in Brazil as leite moça. But it was in 1867 that Henri Nestlé created his first infant formula. He wanted to put an end to the malnutrition of babies who, for any reason, were unable to breastfeed normally. However, what was created as a noble cause became a product capable of generating a lot of profit. 152 years later, the size of the infant formula market was valued at $50 billion. The controversy over Nestlé and infant formula, along with infant deaths in third world countries, erupted in the 70s. It all started with an idea. If you want to make more money, you need more people buying your product. So, how about making your formula consumed globally, even by babies whose mothers are able to breastfeed them normally? But there's a catch. How are you going to convince people that formula is as good as or better than breast milk? Well, the answer seems complex, but it comes down to creating a need where there isn't one. You pay doctors to claim formula is as good as breast milk. You invest in advertising and convince mothers to quickly switch from breastfeeding to the bottle. With that, you influence the power of choice of millions or even billions of women around the world, sowing doubt and promoting convenience. In 1974, a report was published exposing all of Nestlé's aggressive marketing strategy in poor countries in Africa and Asia. Pamphlets were handed out during home visits or even in maternity wards to women who had just become mothers. In addition, women dressed in nurse uniforms were hired to give medical advice and free samples of infant formula. These samples lasted until mothers naturally stopped producing milk. As a result, they became loyal customers of something they didn't even need to buy. However, the problem started with the lack of basic sanitation. Most people in these countries didn't have access to clean water. And to prepare the formula, it needs to be boiled first. But due to low literacy rates, mothers didn't know this and ended up preparing formula with polluted water. This led to a series of infection problems which caused an increase in infant mortality. Even if the mothers were literate in their native language, they couldn't understand the instructions written in another language. Even if they understood, it wouldn't help much since they lacked basic facilities like a stove to heat water and kill bacteria. And no matter how much formulas try to imitate human milk, they are still inferior. Infant formula lacks antibodies and defense cells found in humans, unlike what happens with breast milk, which provides great protection to the baby and significantly reduces the risk of death from diarrhea and pneumonia. Amid all this controversy, a series of boycotts against Nestlé began around the world, and in 1978, Nestlé executives were invited to testify before the United States Senate.
Do you agree with me that your product should not be used where there is impure water? Yes or no?
We provide all instructions.
Just answer, what did you want?
We can't handle this.
Well, as I understand what you say is where there's impure water, it should not be used.
Yes.
where the people are so poor that they're not going to realistically be able to continue to purchase that. And which is going to mean that they're going to dilute it to a point which is going to endanger the health that it should not be used.
Yes.
Now, my final question is, what do you do or what do you feel is your responsibility to find out the extent of the use of your product? Given those circumstances in the developing world, do you feel responsible?
We can't have that response. May I make a reference to...
You can't have that responsibility?
No.
In 1981, the World Health Organization introduced an international code to prevent abusive advertising of infant foods. That's why, nowadays, you notice that commercials are much more subtle.
Slow, easy to digest, and highly nutritious. Remember, breast milk is the best. This is our breastfeeding song for those who help our awesome moms.
The infant formula market is growing 6 times faster than the world population, and it's no wonder this business of feeding children is highly profitable. For every dollar in sales, they make 23 cents in profit. Now, imagine that in a scenario where the revenue exceeds billions of dollars. How did they grow so much even after the World Health Organization and some governments restricted advertising this product? The company's new marketing strategy in this market was brilliant, to the point of sending the unconscious message that the baby needs follow-on milk. Without saying this directly, the companies grouped the products together in a marketing technique known as cross-promotion. The products are packaged almost identically, so they look like part of a sequential category with different products within the same category for different ages and sizes. This way, you create confusion and doubt in people regarding the effectiveness of breastfeeding exclusively with breast milk. Recently, a report showed that in some countries, the code guidelines are being violated by several famous brands in this market. There is also the sponsorship of healthcare professionals to recommend the use of formula as well as the promotion of free samples, especially in countries where the government does not support the code or simply has weak laws. And it leads mothers to partially breastfeed or to completely abandon the process, which should be exclusively breast milk until the baby is 6 months old. But if you think that the dark side of Nestlé ends here, you are completely mistaken. Few people know this, but Nestlé, besides being the largest food company in the world, is also the global leader in the bottled water sector. As everyone knows, water, along with food, forms a pair of crucial importance for our survival. The president of Nestlé in 2005 even suggested in an interview that water is not a human right.
An extreme view, I would say, is defended by some NGOs who insist that water should become a public right. That is, as a human being, you should simply have this right. Going to that point is, of course, an extreme solution.
Obviously, after his statement was very poorly received in the media, he backtracked and said the opposite.
Let me make it clear from the beginning. I have always supported the human right to water. Everyone should have enough clean, safe water to meet their fundamental daily needs.
Around the world, Nestlé dominates this market using a lobbying strategy with small-town governments and landowners who own large aquifers.
You don't need sophisticated technology, however, to know what Nestlé sells the water for. It retails anywhere from $1 to $25 a bottle, but the price Nestlé pays for that water might surprise you. $3.71 for every million liters.
In the United States, Nestlé uses federal land and pays virtually no fees to the Forest Service to obtain water. And when they do pay, it's a ridiculous fee of $200 to pump 130 million gallons of water per year. Apparently, they consider water to be an infinite resource. In California, Nestlé was accused of extracting 25 times more water than allowed in the midst of a drought crisis in the state. In third world countries like Pakistan, Nestlé took possession of a natural aquifer from a small community, diverting the water to their factories, bottling it, and selling it to people who should already have access to that same water for free. Okay, fine, except for the water and infant formula. Maybe you love Nestlé's product variety, especially their chocolates. There's nothing wrong with them, right? It's tough to find anyone who dislikes chocolate. Each Brazilian consumes just over 1 kilo per year of the sweet, a basic mix of cocoa, milk, and sugar. But as delicious as chocolate may be, its industry is surrounded by controversies involving forced and child labor. The base of chocolate is made from cocoa. Countries on the African continent, such as Ghana and Ivory Coast, are leaders in growing this fruit and are the main suppliers for the largest companies in the chocolate industry. In 2000, the British Broadcasting Corporation exposed the issue of slave labor, especially among children aged 10 to 13. In 2001, under pressure, major cocoa companies like Nestlé signed a document pledging to eliminate or at least avoid buying cocoa from criminal sources. 9 years later, a documentary called The Dark Side of Chocolate was released, clearly showing that there was still the presence of child trafficking to work on cocoa plantations in Ivory Coast. At the end of the documentary, the companies did not want to see the footage recorded by the production, but the producers did not give up, and they set up a big screen in front of the Nestlé headquarters, forcing the employees to see the whole truth that they tried to sweep under the rug.
Nestle will now get a chance to see how most of their cocoa is grown. According to international labeling laws, this is strictly forbidden.
However, this contradicts what some companies have pledged. Other chocolate companies have promised to consume.
What is your name? Who is Ali? He is the driver of that bus. For a long time, forced labor in the cocoa industry was everyone's problem. Each person in this business passed responsibility to someone else. Before, Nestlé might not have been responsible for all of this, but now, after years of having its supply chain mapped out, it certainly has its share of responsibility to put an end to it. Nestlé hired an independent company to see if the problem had finally been solved. And in the report, it was concluded that several of Nestlé's suppliers continue to violate laws and codes. To put an end to child slave labor, in a statement, they said the following: "The use of child labor in our cocoa supply chain goes against everything we stand for." No company that buys cocoa from Ivory Coast can guarantee that this doesn't happen. But we can say that fighting child labor is one of the main priorities of our company. In other words, this can be summed up as everyone buys cocoa that comes from child labor, but we're going to keep buying it even though we haven't completely solved this problem yet. It's impossible to know what the true ideals of the founder of Nestlé were, but apparently they were quite honest. And his initial intention was really to sell food to end child malnutrition. If that's true, it's very likely that, wherever he is, he's not very proud of what his company has become today. Even though it holds the title of the largest company in the food and beverage industry in the world, he might even feel ashamed to carry his last name and be involved in so many controversies.